In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast.
I first came to Sustainable Brands in 2011 or 2012, and the dialogue was really about there's something down the road, not too far down the road, that's coming towards us, but it's compounding in the future, and it's going to come, it's hurtling back towards us in the present, and too few people are either aware or doing something about it. And you know, if you look at the IPCC report, the sixth assessment that came out not so long ago, it really said that it's code red for humanity. And what they're talking about is if the planet heats up by 1.5 degrees centigrade, our lives are going to be compromised severely, but in a manageable way, one might argue. If it's 2 degrees, it's that much worse. If it's 3 degrees, you know, the consequences are catastrophic. So all of this is to say that we probably have a window of 10 to 12 years, because these crises are already here, 10 to 12 years to course correct the trajectory that we have right now, after which there's going to be a severity and a cascading effect that we're not going to be able to control. And at that point, a lot of us will be sort of gnashing our teeth and pointing fingers and blaming everybody else, but we will have walked straight past the opportunity we have in the next decade to do something differently, if only in service of ourselves, let alone anybody else. I mean, it's in our own self-interest to do it, and increasingly the market forces will reward companies for doing so. So why not? Why wouldn't you? That's the opportunity.
So there's kind of a conundrum going on here, because it's so inspiring to hear all these business leaders talking about their efforts for regeneration, for sustainability, but also very disheartening, because the more things that you attend, the more events that you attend, the more speakers that you hear from, you hear about the chemicals that go in the gloves. You hear about pesticides correlating in children's cancer. You hear about agriculture contributing to 10 to 50% of the carbon emissions that are increasing the climate. What do you make of all of this if you're a consumer who's just trying to buy a bag of flour and make some pancakes?
You know, if you're just a regular person trying to get through their life, which at the end of the day we all are, no matter what role we play, it is incredibly challenging when you see in the news every day in your phones all of these headlines that tell us how much trouble we're in. At the same time, we're to blame, every single one of us, because what you did may be inconsequential, arguably. What I did in and of itself is small, but the aggregate has led us to this situation where we've got all these plastics in the ocean, we've got all this carbon in the atmosphere, and so on and so on. And, you know, it was the Secretary General of the UN who recently said that we have been at war with nature rather than working with nature. And now, here we are, we're seeing the consequences. So what does a regular person do? Well, firstly, you can either look at it through a cup half empty lens or a cup half full. And I think it's actually a cup half full opportunity. I don't think this is the end of something. I think it's the beginning of something, a reawakening or rebirth of business of a type and scale that we've never seen before, a total renaissance for business, and I'll tell you why. Firstly, I think it's possible today for the first time, unlike any time before, because you might say, well, why hasn't this worked in the past? Because three things have come together. We've got the stakes. We literally have an existential crisis for humanity. We are putting ourselves out of business as a species, not just out of business as, you know, practitioners of, you know, companies and startups and so on. Secondly, we've got stakeholders at the table. So we not only have suppliers and leaders and employees and customers and conscious consumers and foundations and NGOs and non-profits. Most importantly, we have the investor class at the table. And we've seen this huge rise in the dialogue around ESG, environmental, social, and governance metrics in the last year, which is really about how publicly traded companies and companies of all sizes hold themselves accountable in terms of their impact on the environment, society, and how they govern themselves. Thirdly, we've got a new story for business emerging. Whether it's Larry Fink, the CEO of the largest money management firm in the world, BlackRock, or, you know, it's the Business Roundtable CEOs, or whether it's B Corps, or, you know, Mark Benioff at Davos at the World Economic Forum calling out capitalism that doesn't serve humanity. We all are now hearing a reframing of the role of business more broadly. So we've got the stakes, the stakeholders, and the story coming together for the first time. And I'll tell you why I'm optimistic, because I'm very optimistic. A, we have a really strong survival instinct. I don't think you want to go out of business as a human being, and you certainly don't want that for your as yet unborn kids. You know, for me, I've got two daughters and a 19 and a 22-year-old, and they're talking about whether they should have kids or not, given the future we're facing. This is not about being a CEO or a founder. This is about being a dad and a brother and a daughter and a son and an uncle. This is visceral. We don't want to go out of business. Secondly, we've got these younger demos coming through, millennials and Gen Z, who look at the world through a values-based lens because everything they've heard since they were born is how much trouble they're in. They've inherited this broken planet or compromised future. So they're coming through and they're starting companies and leading companies and they're employees inside companies. Then thirdly, you've got exponential technologies that can deliver solutions, whether it's through blockchain or AI or robotics at scale, like never before. And then I think finally, we are waking up to the ingenuity of nature. We are looking around us and seeing all these biological blueprints that are the product of millions of years of evolution that allow us to solve for what we need in our own lives, but also do it in a way that's respectful to nature. And so I don't think there's any cause for apathy or hopelessness. It's almost like so many of us have gone from, well, I'm not really interested or I'm not going to fix it, to, oh, it's too late and there's nothing we can do. What happened to that bit in the middle where we actually tried? We haven't tried yet. We haven't given it a shot. Any one of those things I described hasn't been applied fully, yet let alone all of them together. So I'm incredibly optimistic. This is the reawakening, the rebirth of business and humanity's role on this planet. It's going to be painful, it's going to take time, but it's going to be amazing.
And I think it's a challenge almost for a lot of leaders to kind of take on. Failing is not trying, right? And so we're at this state where, okay, how do we figure it out? And so when it comes to collaboration, it comes to the actual companies that can make an actual difference that really traditionally haven't been regenerative, traditionally haven't been sustainable. What's your message, or what would you say to these leaders who have to make a change, now have to think about their change management, how this incorporates throughout their whole value chain? That is a dramatic challenge, a huge challenge that a lot of leaders have to take on. What's your advice from a leadership perspective?
I have strong opinions about leadership because I think, this is the crisis that we're facing. It's a crisis of leadership. Who's going to step up? And it's not about one company, one billionaire, one industry trying to fix it. It's about all of us. And so the thesis that I really lean into, and I've written a new book about, is called Lead with We. And what does that mean? It means that every single one of us has to step up and show up and make a difference in our own lives. What do I mean? Too many of us go, someone else is going to fix it, failing to realize that we can choose where we invest our retirement dollars or what pension fund we put our money into. We can choose what company we work for. Is it one that hurts the environment or one that helps the environment? And yes, we can make conscious choices in the shopping aisle. So every one of us needs to lead with we. But really the focus of my book is the future of collaborative leadership, where all stakeholders and all sectors of society work together. Why? Because we all created this mess. We got into this mess together, and we've got to get out of this mess together. I mean, there's only 3 scenarios. 1, no one does anything different, and we keep getting the results we're getting now, and things are going to get really bad, and everyone's going to blame each other. Scenario 2, half the people do more good, and half the people don't care. And the ones who don't care undo all the good work that the people, are doing. Or we all go, wait, we're all complicit in this, and we all have a responsibility to fix it, and therefore we all show up in new ways. And that's my problem with stakeholder capitalism. There's been a wonderful conversation about the shift from shareholder to stakeholder capitalism, but I don't think there's enough talk about not just sharing in the benefits of capitalism, but sharing in the responsibilities. And so I think that leadership needs to look like leading with we, which means we need to work together and grow together and live together in new ways that restore and protect the natural and social systems on which all of our futures depend. And, I lay out in my book the various stages for what that means if you're a CEO or founder. What does that mean for a company culture? What does that mean for the products you develop and innovate? What does that mean for your marketing, your community impact work, pre-competitive collaboration, cross-sector partnerships? And how do you pull that all the way through? Why? So that we can accelerate and scale our response to the challenges we face, so we can meet them with equal force. So I think we need to lead with we.
How important is it for leaders to define terms? And what do I mean by that? Defining actual terms, defining what equality means, defining what inclusion means, equity, sustainability, regeneration. So with all these changes that they want to take on, I guess, how important is it for someone to really define what they're trying to achieve?
You know, language frames behavior, and it can either make things simpler and more actionable, or it can confuse things. And I think one of the great challenges in this space is that it can be very wonkish, heady, sort of right brain. And I think that that's a struggle that a lot of large companies especially are having, where when you're talking about ESG metrics or materiality reports and so on, you can lose a lot of people. I think at the end of the day, we're all human beings sitting around a campfire telling stories. Simple, powerful stories that need to land emotionally. Otherwise, you're not going to motivate me to care, right? So what are those stories that companies can tell that are personal and therefore universal, that can really motivate people so they see, oh wow, this is a co-creative act. This is an innovation opportunity. Every one of these challenges is a marketplace opportunity in disguise. And so what stories must we tell that are not about us, but about this future we can enable, and therefore everyone can play a meaningful role in that. And so I think if we tell the right stories, I think if we realize that this is a collaborative exercise, I think if we get off ourselves and that we're the celebrant rather than celebrity of our stakeholder community, we can rally everyone and achieve things that are unimaginable simply because we're doing it together.
You and I spoke about this briefly last night, what makes a good story. You know, we had a couple presenters on, they were both great. One, you could hear a pin drop in the audience, you know which one I'm referring to. When it comes to collaboration, messaging, marketing, inspiring, just in general, what to you makes a good story?
You know, a good story turns on its emotion. We are all human beings. I checked, every single one of us, 100% qualified to be human beings. We connect emotionally, we are hardwired to connect to each other, to connect to the planet. And I actually think the stories that are most powerful today are not ones that are trying to encourage us to learn something new, but rather to remember what we forgot, which is that we are all human beings and part of one family. We are all deeply and profoundly attached to the natural world in which we live. And if we can frame a simple, consistent, and scalable story about the role of your company, brand, startup, in service of that connection to each other and the natural world, in service of a purpose that's larger than ourselves, then you tap into something that's inside everyone, which is, you know what, I want my time to mean something. I want my job to have significance. I want to look back when I get older and say, hey, I made a difference, especially because I'm living in the context of a really challenged environment. I don't think anyone wants to go through life and really just exchange time for dollars and have absolutely no sense of satisfaction or fulfillment from what they do. And so companies, however small or however large, need to give people opportunities to project that internal aspiration for themselves into something that will give their life meaning.
I think it's very difficult for investors, and it's almost a paradox, if you will, with growth and also remembering what's important. Are you seeing a shift in an investor's perspective, and what's it going to take? You mentioned investing is a big part of this whole thing. What's it going to take for people to be focused on growth, but at the same time remembering what's important as they continue to grow?
I think one of the very important things to do is to remain cynical and to second guess the motives of business, because we're not playing at this. We've got to do it for real. And here's the good news. Brands can't survive in societies that fail. And the reason business is waking up and investors are doing things differently is because climate is affecting their supply chains. Extreme weather is affecting their ability to grow the cotton that makes the t-shirt that they then sell at market. It's affecting their ability to attract and keep and inspire the talent they want. And it's affecting them in the shopping aisle where conscious consumers are increasingly going, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? I'm going to buy the brand that's part of the solution. And so investors are now looking to put their capital into companies that are on the right side of history, because increasingly the market forces are rewarding companies that are doing more good. Why? Because they are able to be defensible in public, attract the talent they need, win over not only the purchasers but advocacy of consumers. And so with all of that in mind, you're seeing, especially in the world of ESG and these funds out there, investors, institutional investors, pension funds, putting their money into companies that are defensible from a financial point of view. Why would you put money into a company that isn't set up to survive either A, the literal reality of the world we're going to be living in, or B, the scrutiny of all stakeholders, from investors to employees to consumers. And so I think it's important to always question the motives of brands, because are they doing it disingenuously or not? And investors increasingly are saying, you better be doing this for real, because that's the only way I can make a sound and responsible investment, because you'll be on the right side of history, the right side of the market forces, and defensible in the public size.
I think the message yesterday from the man at Patagonia was, we're not trying to achieve the summit, right? We're trying to manage risk. Each step that we take is managing risk. I think there's a very, very profound note that he left off on. For folks listening out there, Simon does have to go. We're going to continue this conversation throughout the year, but let's wrap this up. Where can people find more information about the new book launch, Lead with We?
Thank you. If you're interested in accelerating and scaling the role that you play in solving for social and environmental crises in ways that drive business growth, whether you're a founder, a startup, or a CEO or C-suite of a large corporation, my new book, Lead with We, lays out a roadmap for that. And to find out more information, you go to leadwithwe.com, or you can now find it on Amazon. And again, I just want to reiterate, as challenging as the future sounds, if we all work together, we can overcome it and launch a renaissance in business that will ensure our future for generations to come.
I believe it. Glad to have you on the show today, Simon. For Simon Mainwaring, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, lead with we, and always, folks, keep it real. Next time.
Thanks.